as usual. I don't know if you can see the camera. I didn't
Right
point
there.
that out.
I was like, there's the
it's
camera. Where's
hiding
the
in
camera?
the back.
In the dark.
Yeah, we have a slightly different setup. We're trying new things. You know, Felicity and I
Hey.
moved into a new place. Felicity's not with us tonight. It's just me and Lisa. You know.
Hi, Maxwell. It's a pleasure
Right,
to meet
whatever
you.
your name is. She's the only other person on the broadcast right now. Lee Jessup, obviously. And if you don't know who Lee is, you should, and you're going to find out. But so welcome, and there's a ton that we're going to go over and discuss. And obviously, when I'm looking over here, I'm going to be looking at the comment section for everybody watching. If you want to post anything, I'll be able to reply there. But let's get into some our sponsors first and foremost. We've got a bunch of things to promote, but thank you to Lee Jessup for being here and for sponsoring tonight's episode, of course.
My pleasure.
And of course to our wonderful, I don't know if we can see this, it's probably too far away, but this is our usual writer's block, but this is a Malbec. Oh, thank you, Lee. Look at that, see? It has to focus, but it's all right. Steel Wines, as always, as you can see on the screen, that is our sponsor tonight. And this is a Malbec that we're going to be drinking. But I will pour ladies first. And any news on your end in terms of like promos or deals or anything that you want to offer, Lee?
Gosh, I just finished a whole bunch of new tools that I'm really excited about that I'm implementing with my writers this year. So my big new thing is a brand builder. A lot of writers have been talking to me about going to panels and trying to figure out what branding is, and nobody actually tells them. So I actually created a series of modules to get writers closer to a very unique, specific branding, both on the personal and the writing level. I just finished my new recommended managers list.
Okay.
That has a bunch of emails on them.
Right. Which are not always easy to get.
But I got my ways.
Yeah.
So just a ton of fun stuff with writers. Couldn't be more excited about the people I'm working with right now. I'm working with more writers than ever before.
Great.
So it takes a little bit longer to schedule to get in with me, but lots of new tools, hopefully, to make it worthwhile.
Well, you can go to leejessup.com. Courtney will be sharing a whole bunch of links as we're going here. We're going to be talking about some recent past blog posts that Lee has put up. I think the branding subject is a good one to cover. We can get into that because the idea of branding, we all kind of have a general sense of, okay, cool, but then how do you do it per industry?
How do you do it in a unique way that's not, I'm a 1 hour drama writer?
Right.
Which is, there's a million others of that, so how do you stand out?
Does it have a lot to do with voice, I assume?
It has to do with voice. It has to do with your personal investment in the work, what you bring to it.
Yeah.
It really has to do with distilling a lot of information to get to your unique brand.
Okay.
I don't think anybody kind of sits in the bath and thinks about it for a while and then goes, here's what I am, and isn't it brilliant?
Yeah.
It takes gathering of information.
There's a self-help level to it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's
Who am I?
How do you see yourself? How do others see you?
Yeah.
What do others remember about you?
Right.
That really kind of helps gather that information.
I feel like it would be even more important in the TV world.
Oh, yeah.
Than
absolutely.
Feature. Yeah, because you have to know how you fit in a writer's room.
Yeah, there's a question of what do you bring in that's unique?
Yeah, yeah.
What makes, I hate the word or the term, what makes you special, but writers' rooms are so reliant on the writer's personal experience and point of view.
Yeah.
That the branding becomes incredibly important.
Because I feel, and maybe I'm way exaggerating here with this comment, but I feel once you get to that upper echelon of staff writers, not necessarily upper level in the writer's room hierarchy, but the staff writer or a couple steps above, the writing ability is all probably pretty close to equally good.
Yeah, ultimately,
some people have talent that's just more than us.
Yeah, if you survived the first year, staffy, SC, you made it to ESC, you're fine. The writing is fine, but the question is, how much emotion and authenticity can you sew into characters? Most of television is written from an emotional growth character point of view, rather the blow shit up point of view.
Right.
Some shows still do that,
Yeah.
but as we're moving more and more into basic cable streamers, we're at almost 500 shows this year.
Right.
Network is less than 150.
Right.
So clearly we're not just doing the blow shit up stuff.
Yeah.
And then that becomes about character resonance world, and the writer's personal experience that can feed into whatever is being written about.
Right. Because eventually you're going to be hired, obviously, for your talent, but it's also, do I like this person? Do I want to sit in the room with this person?
Absolutely. Am I interested in this person? Does this person tell stories or bring things to the table that I think will be beneficial.
You fit in on a team because you are being brought in.
Absolutely.
On a team.
How does the person's personal experience or growth or anecdotes feed into what we're doing? It could be thematic. It doesn't have to be literal, but there is that question of what does this, who does this writer connect with character-wise? What do they bring to the table that we don't have? Right? So what is the unique point of view?
And you don't always know what
No.
they don't have, though. So you're just going to have to be comfortable with who you are and hope that you fit.
Yeah, but you know, when writers go to interview for shows, when they prep for it, there's always the conversation about when you go into your showrunner meeting, who do you connect with in the cast? Who are characters you want to see more of? What are themes that resonate with you in the show? Is there a particular episode that really spoke to you and moved you? What is it? Why? Did it tap into something of your own experience? Let's talk to that. It's all about personalizing it.
And these are the conversations you're having with the writers who are on staff or going to be
all the
staff
time. Everybody who goes up for showrunner interviews. Even, you know, sometimes even executive interviews. I had a writer once go up for a studio interview for a show that he was up for, where he was asked by the studio executive who was interviewing him, of the last season, which episode wasn't perfect and what would you have done differently?
Whoa.
Luckily, the writer is the sort of writer who just preps like nobody's business. So he watched the previous 2 seasons backwards and forwards, inside and out, and could go in and say, you know, in episode 6, I thought the way that the rape was handled wasn't authentic, and here's what I would have done.
Wow. Okay.
But it takes
That's
that
the level of
prep.
preparation. Yeah. You're always on top of things in terms of the news.
I try to be.
And
there's a lot happening.
More than I am. We subscribe to Hollywood Reporter, and every time I look at it, I feel guilty because I know I should be reading it. But biggest news topic and item right now?
Right now, the biggest thing is the fight the WGA is bringing to the ATA, to the Association of Talent Agencies. It's all about the 3% packaging fee. And so WGA has been really, I mean, aggressive is the wrong word, but it's been very proactive in gathering its writers and finding room captains and really talking to the writers and organizing the writers towards whatever is going to happen, which is still very amorphous.
Room captains.
Room captains are just the identified WGA member in any writer's room.
Got it. Okay.
That is representing the WGA
on that show or whatever.
On that show, and the room writers to the WGA.
Okay.
So a lot of very inspired and active writers who want to participate in the fight, and it's a fight that's been long overdue, as you guys know or don't know. Right now, as it stands, agencies make their bulk of their money, specifically the big agencies, on the TV front from packaging shows. Mm-hmm. There doesn't have to be a huge number of elements on any particular show for the agency to claim the package.
Yeah.
For the package, they collect 3% per episode.
Okay.
From the fee that it costs to make television.
A lot of money.
Yeah. Oftentimes, well, 2 things come from that. One is agencies are collecting oftentimes significantly more than the show creators or the showrunners. The other thing that happens from that, the other byproduct, is that, and I'm way simplifying, so bear with me.
Please.
But the other byproduct is that agencies are incentivized to effectively negotiate against their own clients in order to bring particular shows in particular budgets. To say, I can deliver this to you for $2.8 million, and I will populate the room with writers who are getting paid below their quote. Not always. This doesn't happen every time, but we've certainly seen cases of that. Okay. So they're effectively incentivized to negotiate against their clients, but for the package. The flip side of that is that there are writers in big agencies who go in and say, put me only on package shows, because when you're on a package show, you don't pay your agency the 10%. The agency won't get paid twice on that particular show. So they won't collect your commission
plus the fee from the show.
Yeah. So there's many different sides to it. It still remains to be seen.
Basically, the agencies are always finding ways to make as much money as they possibly can.
And with the boon of television that we've seen over the last decade and then some, it's been a huge game changer. There's a reason why we're at 495 scripted shows.
Right.
And the agencies are working hard to make those packages happen because effectively, the moment they have the package, they make that 3% for the life of the show.
Right.
And really actively don't have to do a great deal of work. They're not producing it.
Yeah. No, they have very little to do. They have to manage some of those contracts and renewals and, season, et cetera. But what's crazy, and this is probably such a lame question, but where the hell's all the money coming from? Like, I mean, I think it's
coming out of the production budget.
But it's coming, and not necessarily just for the agency. I think, like, on a bird's eye view, like, why are there so many more shows being made? Obviously, there are more avenues and networks to be seen and watched. But that just means more people are paying money to make these shows.
Yeah.
So is that...
Listen, Apple was just awarded Matt Chernis, who runs content for them, $2 billion. It's not just, it happened a year ago, to create content. So you have these very deep pockets, the pockets of Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Facebook, list goes on, who are getting in this game. Certainly basic cable has expanded its foothold aggressively. Streamers have expanded their foothold aggressively. They're getting subscription money. So thus far, it has signaled nothing but growth.
The subscription model math makes sense to me. It's just so much more difficult for me to understand the monetization of advertising.
It still exists.
Of course, it still exists. It's just easier for me to understand, okay, if you have 100 million subscribers at $10 a month, yeah, it's a ton of money. So, of course, then you can make content. And you have to continually make content to supply the subscribers. But advertising seems like such a bigger risk.
It is a bigger risk, but it's a different business model.
Right.
I mean, if you also look at basic cable, most, not all, but a significant chunk of basic cable has part or full ownership by a studio, which is then owned by a corporation. So there is a longer runway for
Money's
those risks.
Kind of going in smaller funds.
Yeah, and all those shows are effectively satellite businesses for the larger corporation.
Yeah.
And especially in a time where network is either holding or declining in terms of their show output year over year, and they're declining small percentages right now. They're toggling between like 146 and 153, but they're really not breaking out of that. And the expectation is that we're going to continue to see a retraction over the years.
Yeah.
They need to feed their satellite businesses that can go to a Showtime or a USA or whatever, and get that viewership because they're not getting it on network.
It's so funny because my brain's going way off topic in terms of what I wrote down in the notes, but I'm just thinking of my experience watching TV, which I assume is pretty much the same as most people, where there are a certain number of original content related shows that you want to watch, that you can watch, otherwise you don't get anything done.
Yeah.
And then there's the mindless shows, the HGTVs, the Discovery Network shows, the reality shows.
But reality is completely separate from this conversation.
Totally, but now I'm wondering, I'm not wondering, I know they have writers on those shows.
Yes, but those are reality writer. It's not WGA.
It's not WGA, and that's a completely different filter
It's
system.
writer-producer. It's a different hierarchy.
Yeah, but I think it's important for writers to know that who don't understand that.
But it's a completely different thing, and it's very hard to move from reality into scripted.
Right.
Very hard.
Okay.
I've worked with a number of reality TV producers who are very successful and showrunners who are like, I'm ready.
Yeah.
The industry wasn't ready.
Yeah.
So it's a different hierarchy.
Yeah, and obviously not as much money to be paid out to the writer.
No. I mean, listen, but if you look at Netflix animated shows or Amazon animated shows, you're getting paid under a new media contract. You're not getting paid under the same contract that you would have gotten for network television.
Right.
It's also shorter shows.
Yeah.
So you're going to get 20 weeks in a room, 25 weeks in a room. It's not the 40 that you would have gotten on a network 22 episode pickup.
Yeah. It's just interesting. There's just there's
it's
so
a fascinating
much.
industry.
It's really fascinating.
Yeah.
Because just the math behind it all, and then where's the money going, and how much is the writer supposed to be paid, and then of course the people who decide how much a writer's supposed to be paid, and then it's just. Meanwhile, we're just trying to create content. Like that's really all we're trying to do.
People are trying to tell stories. People are, maybe despite that, the WGA is bringing it to the ATA is going to halt what we know is peak TV.
Right.
Maybe it won't touch it at all.
Right.
There's conversation about, is there going to be an exodus from the agencies to management companies? Are there going to be writers, kind of non-showrunnery writers who are going to go, screw this, I'm just going to go with manager? Everything remains to be seen right now. Wow. It's an open field. There's a lot of theory in terms of what's going to happen. It's going to be a fascinating few months. So for people like me who just love watching it,
right? Yeah,
amazing.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
And then the feature world, of course, then is a completely different monster too.
Yeah, but even on features, there's packaging fees.
That's true.
So,
the agencies are they've done a lot more of that in the past 2 or 3 years compared to previous years. And why is that? Because with the TV model, I get it because you have a a certain amount of money that you can see out of that.
It's a bite off the budget.
Yeah. Okay. So that's just.
You'd much rather take a bite off a 3% bite off of a $10 million budget than 10% from your director's $300,000.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And they're taking that as, I guess you could say, as producers, but what are the
packaging? It's
just
all,
a packaging fee.
It's just they get packaging fee.
Which is just crazy to me, you know.
Yeah, and oftentimes, like, an agency will say to a studio, "Here's the budget, and we want to get this star in, so we're going to give you the star. We're going to make the package. Then we're going to take our percentage."
So there was some really savvy agent who said, "Yeah, okay, we'll give you the star if you include all of the other clients that we have, and we have some form of a packaging agreement."
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes. I mean, they don't have that much pull, but certainly if there's somebody that they want to push in that direction, they have some say there, because they're involved in.
They own the talent. I mean,
they own the talent, and they own the negotiating time for the talent. So they can negotiate for the clients that they want to get on this package or not.
Right.
So it's happening on a much bigger scale on television, but that doesn't mean it's not happening on the feature side.
Yeah.
So it's going to be, maybe it'll be a complete non-event. Maybe it'll be a huge fight.
Well, it already is.
Yeah. I mean, right now it's in discussion. Yeah. But who does what remains to be seen.
Interesting. All right. Well, okay. So going. Lee recently posted. Well, and you do it regularly. I shouldn't say just recently. You do it on a regular.
Yeah, I post every Tuesday.
Every Tuesday she sends out, it's a newsletter that then ends up as a blog post on your site.
It actually starts as a blog post and then becomes a newsletter.
Okay.
So, but yes.
So you should subscribe to the newsletter.
Yeah, new stuff every Tuesday, my ranting and musings.
And they're always just great reads, and I picked out a couple that I thought would not only be entertaining, but just, good conversation starters. But there was one that you wrote, "A Few Bad Eggs have garnered screenwriters a bum rap. Yep. What can you do to combat perception of screenwriters being crazy?" And that is something that kind of has gone around town for a long time.
Forever.
Yeah.
I mean, it actually really bums me out because I work with a ton of writers who are no less sane than anybody else.
Right.
I mean, vulnerable and emotional and, potentially emotional bordering on neurotic. But to me, that does not crazy make. And I work with a lot of people who are really talented and lovely people to be around. So kind of the reputation really bums me out.
Yeah.
Because in my experience, most writers are not crazy, but there have been a few actions by a few, like I said, bad eggs that really have created this moniker of like crazy screenwriter. Yeah. Which is unfortunate, but writers really have to consider how to handle themselves in the professional space, right? There are certain alarm bells that
other people hear.
Yeah, absolutely. When you say certain things, when you do certain things.
Right.
So, you want to always sign release forms unless they seem unusually long or different than the usual template. By all means, run them by a lawyer. Right. But ultimately, those writers who won't sign a release form, those are interesting. I once had a writer come to me and say, "I'm totally unknown. I want to approach the industry and I'm writing up my release form for people to take meetings with me." And it was one of those you're like, because it wasn't hard enough to get meetings anyway.
Now you have to
now they have to sign a release form to talk to you.
Yeah.
Not happening.
That is just never going to happen.
Yeah, and it was one of those things that luckily I managed to kind of slow him in his tracks to really rethink that. But, for somebody who has no leverage, right? Nobody knows you from Adam. Nobody is, sitting and waiting for you to show up.
Right.
Showing up and saying, I have a concept. Can't tell you what it is until you sign a release form.
Right.
You're nuts.
The guy's going to get up or girl's going to get up and walk away, man.
Yeah. I mean, who's wasting their time on that?
Yeah.
Sitting down and reading your release form and figuring out what they're signing and why they're signing. And
they're going to work with somebody who understands the industry.
Yep.
Before they're going to work with somebody who doesn't. And that's why you're all watching, so that you have a better understanding. Because there are a lot of things that seem common sense, especially for us because we've been in the industry for 15 years or more. But, for people starting out, there's just some basics that you probably don't even think about, good or bad.
Yeah.
So what else? Don't be paranoid.
Don't be paranoid. obviously material has been stolen in Hollywood, so let's not pretend otherwise.
Yeah.
And that's why it's really important that whenever you send out material, you follow it up with an email, even if you handed it to somebody, you really make sure that you have the paper trail for your work. So should something happen that is nefarious or inappropriate, you have the paper trail to back it up. But I've also heard from people who have written a script, showed it to nobody, and went, Hollywood stole it. I don't know. I don't know how.
Yeah.
And the reality is that, unless you have some way to prove that elves have crawled into your computer and, kind of taken all the data and dropped it on the lap of the right person, it's a really hard conversation. And again, this doesn't, I think those conversations that are not founded actually belittle the very real cases of people who've had their materials written.
Right, that's true.
It just creates a bad reputation. It makes people roll their eyes when you suddenly hear that. So that's why before you consider these conversations, consider really paper trailing everywhere that your script goes so that you're aware of it. Don't be paranoid about sending it out. Your job is to get read. Your job is to get exposure to your work.
And the people reading it, they don't want a lawsuit either.
Yeah.
They don't want to deal with that because it's going to make their reputation look terrible.
Absolutely. And nobody wants the time and expense that takes. But, you have to, ultimately it's your job as a writer to share your work in the smartest way and kind of to cover your butt. And getting the work out there. Be ready to talk to, give out the log line of your work to people.
Yeah, don't be afraid to just, here's the idea.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, success in Hollywood is very much execution dependent. If it wasn't, people would be selling ideas left, right, and center. You can't just sell
there was that
ideas.
example that you gave of a person sitting across from you who slipped the log line upside down on a piece of paper and said, read it, but don't read it aloud.
Yeah, and don't comment with any specifics. I mean, this happened. I work out of a coffee shop. And a writer did that to me once where I was like, wow. Okay, this is going to be a problem because, I mean, this is an industry where you transact in ideas, you gain interest on the idea, but then you garner representation or you sell a project or you get a project set up based on execution. Without the execution, you're not going to get that second part. So, I mean, if you look at something like The Hangover, really, or Hangover, really basic idea, It's not a huge, intricate idea. But if you gave it to 10 writers, you would have 10 different scripts. So you really have to consider that it's about how you, the writer, is executing the work. And so get comfortable talking about it. And that's where, did we talk in this round about Pitch Fest or the last round about Pitch Fest?
We can mention Pitch Fest again.
So we talked about...
This is our third take for Why Wednesday.
I'm having a little bit of a whiplash. We talked about Pitch Fest and whether or not they're worth it and how you should perceive them. I think there's great value to going and talking about your work and just seeing how it's received. And
how you are able to do it. You can gather rhythm, you can understand, okay, this is the right way to pitch it, and here, even though I was maybe a little nervous, I said this word and I'm going to use this word instead, and because it's going to give that much more of a response.
I said that, it really hooked them. I think I lost them on this part. It's really important to talk about your work, and it's really important to understand the industry expects you to do that. There are people who have said to me, I will not take a meeting in a coffee shop or a restaurant. Well, guess what? Most meetings take place, especially initial meetings with representation. You're not going right up to, the top floor of CAA. You're going to meet an agent or a manager at a coffee shop, at a coffee bean, or whatever.
I just recently met with the creative executive with a visual effects company, and they're starting an original content division, whatever. And we were easily the loudest people in that breakfast restaurant that we were at. And I was pitching at the top of my lungs to this person. Here's this idea, and I don't care what. There's, family sitting next to me. What are they going to do? Are they going to remember that by heart?
No, and the thing is, nobody's lying in wait looking for your idea. I'm a believer that the majority of screenwriters are writing their own content. I mean, I can't tell you how often somebody will reach out to me and say, I have an idea. Do you have a writer? My answer is 99% of the time, no. Because my writers are writing their original content, and unless you're paying...
Right.
Or getting that project made, we're probably not going to have that conversation. So I don't feel like Hollywood is lying in wait. When it happens, it's ugly and it's horrible. And usually coincidental in some way. You delivered a script and they really hooked onto an idea, but that idea ended up bleeding into another project, And that really sucks. Don't get me wrong. I'm not at all justifying that.
Yeah.
But I don't think anybody's like, what can I steal today?
Right. Ideas are in the ether.
Yeah.
I've had multiple instances in my creative life where I had an idea, I tried to develop a little bit. I wrote this story that was kind of loosely based on this old book called Holy Blood, Holy Grail. And it was like, fictionalized, yet very close to the real thing that happened in terms of the bloodline of Jesus Christ. Mary Magdalene and all that stuff. And so I'm like, this is amazing. I'm going to try to come up with some kind of adventure story. And suddenly, 8 or 9 months later, the Da Vinci Code comes out. And I'm like, can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
Dan Brown had that idea well before me. And he obviously did a much better job than I probably ever could have. So it's just like, this is what happens. Sometimes ideas are out there.
Yeah, and listen, whenever I have a writer, a working writer, kind of clue onto a great idea, whether it's based on IP or just something that feels like it's in the ether,
Yeah.
I often hear from my writers, okay, now it's a race to who will write it first. I get this idea, somebody else will get this idea. Now I'm in a race to write it first.
Yeah.
I got this idea, it's amazing, I can't believe it's not been done, there's nothing out there about it. 1, 2, 3, go.
Right.
The race is on now.
Yeah. It's like the example I used of, there are every now and then ideas that come along, like Happy Death Day or The Hangover, or these easy to understand, Liar, Liar, but it's still all in the execution. Somebody could have made a really terrible Liar, Liar movie, like really stupid.
Listen, how many vice versas?
Right. Body switch things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah. No,
I mean, did we need all of them?
Right. Right. All right. Switching gears to, and I think this is a really important topic because everybody watching, you've had or taken notes sometime in the past, right? So we're going to talk about do's and don'ts of taking and receiving notes from people. Really pretty basic stuff, but I think it's important to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think ultimately how you get better is getting notes, right? And sometimes even getting those notes that really piss you off.
Yeah.
Because there's a kernel of truth in there, and
Right.
you know that it kind of blows up what you did.
Yeah.
But you have to take the fucking
I've had
note.
that many times.
Yeah. So it's really important to know how to take them in a respectful fashion. You don't have to agree with all the notes. You don't have to implement all the notes. But if you ask somebody for notes, if they're of enough importance to you to ask for them, then you have to take them respectfully.
Yeah.
You have to listen. You have to potentially ask questions. You prefer not to defend everything that you've done in the script. You can ask, okay, that didn't work for you, and I set that up over here, and I paid it off over there.
Right.
That didn't connect for you. Okay, got it. As opposed to, well, I did set it up earlier.
Right. You
So I don't know why I didn't get it.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been told to fuck off in a note session because I told somebody that the work was divisive, and it was.
Right.
And the joke was that then I was given written notes that he was given by an executive that called the work divisive, and I was like, did the executive get the fuck off? Because I did.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I was told that I was giving certain notes because I'm a woman, because I'm too young, because I'm too old, because, I've never worked as something.
Is there some amount of merit when a writer's paying for the notes compared to when they're not?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that if you pay for the notes, right, if you pay somebody for the notes and you feel like they have not done their job, they haven't read the script, absolutely go back and say, yo, my script was not actually read.
Right.
Clearly, the reader missed this plot point, that plot point. What they wrote is not cohesive. Yeah. Either they, cut and pasted from another coverage and didn't take, or the notes and didn't take the material. Absolutely. You should absolutely go back and say, hold on, time out, in the most kind of respectful fashion.
Yeah.
I don't mean to be a, negative Nelly, but
yeah.
I don't think my script was read with full attention, and here's why.
Right.
There's a character in the notes that doesn't exist in my script.
Right.
The reader completely missed a turn, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So you should absolutely take that. But when you ask if you ask somebody for a favor for notes, first of all, want their notes.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I've certainly heard from people like, well, I wasn't really, I don't think that highly of him, but I figured, okay, if you don't think that highly of him, don't ask for the notes.
Yeah, right.
Or her, for that matter.
Yeah.
But really, really consider how you're taking the notes.
I think the first thing is don't immediately defend. It's okay you should internalize first and let the note come in and go, okay, maybe I'm missing something. If not, you might just throw the note away. Like, I don't agree with it. But if you get 3 sets of notes and that same note's being made in each of those sets of notes, you're going to have to look at it.
Listen, I'm a big fan of sitting with the notes and ultimately identifying what notes are notes that are helping you tell the story that you want to tell.
Yeah.
And specifically when getting notes from other writers, oftentimes you get the note that is applicable to the way that they would write this screenplay or this pilot should it have fallen into their hands, right? Those oftentimes are not conducive to the writer, right? It's not the story you want to tell. The story you want to tell is A, and the other writer is like, but it really could be, this hilarious, 1950s comedy.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you're totally changing the genre.
Yeah, and you're like in a post-apocalyptic melodrama.
Right, yeah.
Those notes are not necessarily going to help you, and that's where you really have to filter who you're getting the notes from. Writer notes can do that. Some writers are really great at kind of switching off the creative brain and turning to a more analytical brain.
Yeah.
Others less so, and that's okay. And I think it's important to hear all those suggestions and then let go of the ones that don't work for you.
Right.
I don't believe that 100% of notes from 100% of the people have to be satisfied.
Right.
You can't do that. But it's also like, listen to the note. Don't try to offer fixes. Like, I was sitting with somebody the other day and I said, okay, I think that there is a story element that is really missing. You're talking about a unique character, but we don't see how the uniqueness is really playing out throughout the piece.
Yeah.
Right? And the writer said to me, like, well, what if I wrote a scene about this? I was like, no, it's not like, hold on, it's not a scene.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've heard it like, well, I can fix it in dialogue. If I'm telling you it's a big note, and you're like, well, I think in that scene around page 46, I can put in a line.
Right.
Even if that's what you end up doing, if I'm telling you that to me, it's a big note, at least give it the space to breathe as opposed to like, oh yeah, that's really easy, I can fix it. If I think it's a big surgical note, that's going to present some challenge, at least say, okay, let me think about how to fix it.
I think I take an approach of kind of like a 4-level approach, bird's eye view being concept. If it passes my, does this concept work and is the concept going throughout the whole script? Okay, cool. Now let's look at just the structure and the rhythm and how I feel as I'm going. And then tying to the next level of character development, is the character also going with the flow and arcing, etc. If I can't get past one of the top 2 levels, it doesn't matter about the character development. Like the character is not, you might have some great scenes, but that's what you're talking about. You can't live at the scene level if you haven't decided or figured out what's going on the conceptual level.
Yeah, and especially, for me, if I find that there are a lot of first act, like second half, or first half of the second act. So Act 1, Act 1A. If I feel like there's a lot of challenges that came up there, I'm going to focus my attention there. I'm not going to give you third act notes. No. Because that third act is dependent on a first act. And same with a pilot. Like if we have a teaser in one, right, and we're noting that, and it's really challenged, and things are not set up appropriately. Yeah. I'm not going to note your Act 5. Right. Because I need things to change up front. Yeah. And so giving those notes, those Act 5 notes, to me, like I can talk about it broadly, but I'm not going to do the deep dive there because there are setup issues that, to me, without a setup, you're fucked.
Right, because then you don't know as a reader what you're latching onto from a story level, and then how that character is then going to connect to the story level, because then you're just writing like a character study, which can be interesting, maybe, but I've had a lot of writers, because when I work with writers for the long term, I know that I'm going to be developing the project and giving notes on the same project multiple times, as opposed to a one-time sit-down read. If I'm giving a one piece of notes for one script, I'm going to read the whole thing because that's what they paid me to do. But if I'm going to be going for the long term, I'll tell them I stopped at 40. I didn't, it didn't get me past it. They're like, oh, can you just read the rest? I'm like, it's not going to make a difference.
Listen, I just read a pilot from a very talented novelist and TV writer that I work with. And I read it the whole way through because she's a blast to read. But I ultimately had to go back and tell her, like, I really appreciate what you did. You wrote the season finale. Can we now go back to the beginning of the story? Right. Like, some things became clearer as we went along with the material, which was great. And she is a good writer, so it's never laborious reading her. But ultimately, the note was like, I can give you, like, I gave her some detail. There was a bullet point list, but ultimately the big note was, this is not the beginning of the story. Right. And this is not a flash forward from the beginning of the story. Yeah. This is just, like, 10 episodes in, 12 episodes in. We're in a season finale. So
there's a term for that where it's like the I don't remember, like the second episode as your pilot, but it looked like she went to the 10th episode.
Yeah, she wrote a season finale. And I've seen it happen a million times. Not a million times, but I've certainly been there where my writers, I kind of have to roll them back and go, hold on. Yeah. Why is this, especially with TV, why is this the beginning of the story? I get that this is the episode you actually really want to write.
Right.
That's, kind of fun and flashy and big and all of these big turns and where it leaves us at the end. But the question in TV has to be, why does our story start here? Specifically today with narrative television.
Yeah.
Right? You have to begin at the beginning of the story.
Right.
You can decide to flash forward and flash back and whatever mechanism you're using.
You can have the Breaking Bad, beginning of, the craze.
Yeah, the flash forward and then we flash back and the entire episode is following that format. I get it. Been overdone, but if it's really good, I'll take it.
Right.
But I think ultimately you have to ask yourself, where does the story begin?
Yeah.
With serialized television, because we're having very little procedural.
You're watching a long movie. And
exactly.
So a season is technically following the arc of a movie.
Yeah, listen, if you look at Haunting of Hill House, if you look at Gianni Versace that just won an award at the WGA, if you're looking at Mrs. Maisel, if you're looking at kind of the best television that we have out there, and there's so much good stuff. If you look at Sex Education, if you look...
I just finished Sex Education. I was so disappointed. I thought there was another episode. The last episode was like, no, that's not enough. Oh, I wanted
Russian Doll starts on the first time that she comes back.
Right.
She's like, what the fuck was that?
Yeah.
But there is an arc there that has to start at the beginning of the arc.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. All right, moving on. We got maybe 20 minutes. And sorry, everybody, that we can't take questions. Maybe Courtney
Are you getting them over text?
She looks like we've got some text.
Yay.
Let's see. We'll pause here. Okay, so Mary Davis. It seems to me the only thing in the writer's control then is to be the best writer possible to raise your value to all the parties, agencies, managers, producers, etc. in terms of raising your level of value.
Here's what I love about writing. Because I've seen it at work every time. An actor needs an audience. A director needs a crew and equipment and all of these things to execute. Yeah. A writer needs a page. A writer needs to sit down with a page and do the work. And they get to invent themselves, reinvent themselves, restart conversation. There's so much control in the writer's hands of their own career and where they're going. I've seen writers...
More than the writer thinks.
Much more so, because the writer has the ability to create and they don't need anybody's permission to do that. Yeah. Of course, it's challenging to then get reads and get exposure, but good work or great work rises to the top.
Yeah.
And so I get all the frustration that a writer goes through, but I can tell you that I've seen writers whose career was starting to really disappoint, reinvent themselves and get right back up to the top with their writing. I've seen writers, I sat with somebody today and said, can writers come out of nowhere and have a career? Of course. One of my writers just got into Disney, into the ABC Disney Fellowship.
Yeah.
She came out here from New York 2 years ago not knowing anybody.
Wow.
2 years ago in March.
Yeah.
Didn't know any, she knew me.
Yeah.
I'm not that much.
Right.
She really made a point to drive the work, go out, network, meet people. Nobody at Disney got a call from Shonda Rhimes saying, let this girl in.
Yeah.
And I've seen that happen again and again. So everybody comes out of nowhere.
So how hard did she work in those 2 years, though?
She worked her ass off. Yeah. But, for one of those 2 years, she had a job, a full-time job, a very demanding full-time job. But, she drove her craft forward. She took classes. She, she's a person who's a natural introvert. And she did something one day that I was like, I'm in awe of you because I can never do it. Knowing that she's an introvert and has to network, there was one day that she spent an entire Saturday sitting on the stoop outside of her apartment building, waiting for passersby so she can start up conversations with them.
Oh my God.
And did that for a full day. And she's a confessed introvert. Did it for a full day.
I think even if you're an extrovert, that would be difficult to do.
But she was like, I'm going to do it, so I did it.
What did she learn from that? Now I'm really curious. Do you remember?
Well, she learned, it was easier for her to do than she thought. She learned how to start conversations with anyone about anything. She networked her butt off. She met a lot of people, but nobody handed her this program. She got the final interview, and we're like, well, you're not going to get in.
I think that's such a great example of the question that we all need to be asking ourselves. I don't mean just you watching, myself included, but how willing are you to get this, to make this happen?
Yeah.
What are you willing to do?
Listen, I think that at the end of the day, if you, first of all, really fight for your craft and really challenge yourself and get input from people who are smarter than you, who know better than you, who can at least point you in the right direction, and not necessarily go for the people who compliment you, but go to those negative Nellies who know what they're talking about and force you to kind of step up or say, I'm going to go my own way. And then, get out there, meet people, network. Networking is an ugly word. I believe in building relationships, genuine, meaningful relationships with people in your community. So build your community, study the industry, read a lot. I mean, at the end of the day, what are we asking? We're asking writers to watch a lot of TV, read a lot of scripts. Could be worse.
Yeah, study up on the industry that you apparently love.
I mean, some people have to dissect frogs for their jobs. We're not asking that.
Right. You might have to if you want to go into research.
Exactly, but you take that subject on. So there's a lot to do. At the end of the day, I think that it's just doing it very methodically and steadily and consistently until you see some traction, and then doing it some more. But everybody that I don't know anybody who's connected to any big executive who gave them their first break, and it's been gravy ever since.
Now, it's the who you know cliche, I think, is probably more exaggerated than you think. Of course, it's important.
Yeah,
but you're going to end up finding those people who you know.
But it's also the who you know that is one step ahead of you or two steps ahead of you. Not who's running the studio.
Right. Yes.
And remembering those people are 1 or 2 or 5 steps ahead of you was once where you are right now.
Yeah.
And not all of them, but some of them will be willing to extend a helping hand. I mean, one of my writers is running a show for the first time, just started a few months ago. And I've known him since he was taking class at UCLA, really talented writer. But I've known another one of those who knew nobody. But made his way and staffed on a couple of shows and is now, for all intents and purposes, the head writer running a show for Netflix. And one of the things that I loved the most that he did was the first week that he was putting together his room and the show and the whole thing, one of the first things that he did was hire a writer who'd never been in the room before. And I absolutely love that.
Yeah, right.
The first person that he hired for his writer's room was an unknown writer who, granted, was in one of the fellowships and he had some good recommendations on her, but the choice was, I know who I want for my number 2 and I know who I'm going to populate some of this with. First thing I want to do is give somebody the break that I was given.
Awesome.
Which I love.
Yeah. No, it's awesome. All right, E.J. White, I'm curious. You have to hand your script to the right person when it comes to genre. Does the same apply to career coaching? Like, what genre does Lee work on, or does she work on all?
I work on everything. I mean, I probably don't work on sexploitation, that kind of sex horror thing, because I'm that point, ultimately I will not be the person to note that. I don't read all of my clients. Some writers that I've worked with for years are I don't need you to read me, we're fine. And they're, some are working writers, some are not. They go to notes to people that I trust. They work with mentors that I know and like, and I'm if that person signed off, we're good, we're golden.
So the people that you don't read, what do you do for them?
Well, ultimately, with everybody, it's career strategy. How do we move this thing forward? With writers who are starting out, it's about making sure the body of work is there, right?
Right.
What do you need to go out? If the first step is assembling a body of work and going out to build pedigree or going out to representation, what do we need to have in place to be confident when we go out? How do we go out? So how does the writer approach? How do we build community in order to stimulate some referrals as things happen? There are writers that I'll read and writers that I won't. It really depends on the writer. Right now I'm reading about a script a day, so I'm reading those to my people.
Okay.
But, I do agree that there's a question of sensibility, but at the end of the day, good work is good work.
Yeah.
I can read good work and say, I probably wouldn't go see this movie or I wouldn't tune into this show, but I think you did your job.
Yeah, right.
Just because it doesn't speak to me doesn't mean that I can't recognize that the work is there, the quality is there.
Yeah.
And it's really kind of a fascinating thing that when you're reading good writing. And I've read good writing before. I was well, it's really good, but it's not for me.
Sure.
But it's really good.
Yeah.
So I think that ultimately, when it's about building a career, it's about understanding who the writer is, what do they bring to the table, where do they want to go, how do we get them there, how do we create forward motion that's going to be kind of meaningful and sustainable, that's going to lead to the next thing.
Yeah. I think a good, easy way to answer your question, EJ, is if you have a good script consultant, regardless of what they're really doing, will be able to do that and read any script and give you notes. They shouldn't say, "Oh, I don't read horror." I would be weirded out by.
Listen, I know I was talking to a manager a couple weekends ago who said, "Listen, I don't represent comedy. Doesn't mean I don't know comedy writers. I don't get it. I don't have a sense of humor. I don't get it." So he recognizes his blind spot.
Right. For a manager, that's different, though.
Yeah, but ultimately, most managers prefer to diversify their list. So anybody who's looking for that rep who's just dealing in thriller, just dealing in psychological whatever, just dealing in horror, that's a problem. You shouldn't be looking for that because then you're effectively competing with your manager's list before you even get to compete for the job. So you want a manager that works, that has a few comedy writers, a few thriller writers, a few family adventure writers, a few whatevers, a few half hours, 1 hours, because you want to be one of 3 that they would think about for a job, not one of the 20.
And it could be something that you look for when you're trying and you're ready to start reaching out to managers and querying them and say, "Look, I noticed you only have 1 comedy writer on your list. Why is that? Would you consider another one?"
Absolutely.
And that would be a really easy email to write because you're just asking for an answer. You're not asking for them to read something. And something you got a conversation.
Absolutely. But I think it's also when you look for representation, while you don't want to look for somebody who only reps comedy writers because you're a comedy writer. Well, you already have all the comedy writers. You do want to agree on sensibility. If they represent writers that you're like, "Oh my God, I read their pilot last year and that thing was awful. This guy took it to market? Never mind." I think that's absolutely fair and something that today with like the Blacklist, the Dropbox that we all have, right, that houses all the Blacklist scripts. Like, sign on, like, agree with the quality of the work there. So if you read something in there and you're like, "Oh, how they do that?" I don't get it, it's terrible. Probably not the rep that you should be going with. Same with all the pilots that are out there today. It's so easy to access all that information.
I think that speaks to something really important, is that you shouldn't just sign with the first manager who says that, unless you love that person and you really feel comfortable and it's like a high-end management 360 top, whatever you want to call it. You have the right to choose who you are repped by. You have to, in the very least, say, like, I don't think it's a fit. I don't think you should approach every rep in the book, if there is still a book, and try to land representation. I think you should do research up front and really question, is this somebody I want to work with? Because also that then creates, there's some writers that don't have referrals in, right? Who don't have a direct path, so they end up using query letters. And I just emailed with a client of mine in New York who used queries to reach out and did a ton of research, reached out to like 50 people and got something like 15 read requests, which is not freaking bad. But you do that research, and that research shows up in your targeted queries. I'm reaching out to you because this and that, the other, you represent this person. I love that script on the Bloodlist last year. I write same but different. Here's what I have. All of that shows up. So I don't believe in just kind of going, I'll blanket it. There's so much information out there today. There's Scripts and Scribes that has manager interviews. I have videos with managers on my website. There's so much out there that I think you really have to kind of study the approach of a lot of these managers and figure out, do I want somebody who develops? Do I want somebody who doesn't develop? Am I looking for a manager who staffs? That's a rare bird. Do I want to be with a big management company, a small manager? Do I want to be with like a young hustler, or am I going to a Brillstein Entertainment Partners that are an institution? So I think you really have to do your research and get to know the space, and that's where building community is also really helpful, because suddenly you'll have friends who were repped by this person and didn't work out so well, or they interviewed over here, they met over there. They have that insight, so you want to have more people to draw information from. We could go on for a long time on that topic. It's important. I hope everybody understood. But Sylvia Marie Llewellyn is saying, I paid for feedback from a company in Los Angeles, and the reader wrote about my protagonist Maggie. There was no Maggie in my script. So that's where you go back to the vendor. You go back to the service that you paid, and you say, hold on, I'm really confused. Misread? You listen. You should absolutely ask to get what you paid for. Always that's better. A simple, stupid mistake that a reader should not have been. Absolutely not. I mean, listen, I ran a reader service for years and a cover service, and that is absolutely something that you should go back for and say,
There is no Maggie in my script, and there is no character that matches that description. It's not like her name was Mary and he called her Maggie, and even that is not a mistake that I generally like to see. But you should be able to go back and say, is there any way I can get a reread? Because obviously the reader didn't do his job.
Right. You have every right to do that when you're
absolutely no question. I don't care where the company is.
Yeah.
You know, you should absolutely get what you paid for, and that's the time and attention given to your script.
Yeah. Anthony is asking, do you set up meetings?
Do I set up meetings?
I assume you mean for your clients.
Very rarely. I always. Ooh.
Bella is. Felicity
got something
isn't
to
here.
say.
Anytime Felicity's gone, Bella wails for. Anyway.
It's better than my dogs. My dogs are very vocal. I have 2 puppies, and they're like vocal. Hi, Bella. Very rarely will I read something. It's very rare. So I always say it's like, don't play that lottery. It's a losing battle. Will I read something that I think, oh my God, I love this. The writing is right there. It's awesome. And I know the people that I think will respond to it.
Right.
I maybe do it 5 or 6 times a year.
Yeah.
But I will go to bat for those scripts. It's very hard for me. I always say I'm going to be your harshest critic, because if I say, oh my God, this is amazing, it has to go out there. And that means that not only is the writing great, it also fits with my personal sensibilities. Because I've read good work where I had to say...
And the people you know your sensibilities.
Yeah, and my thing is, I have to be able to defend the work. And I can never send material out to people where they come back and question the quality of the writing.
Mm-hmm.
I've had people do that, and it pissed me off because I knew that they were wrong.
Right.
But I need to know they're wrong. You know, I've read good material, and I was like, it's executed just fine. I could not care less.
Yeah.
In which case, I will not go to bat for the material.
Right.
But I always tell people, I'm going to be your harshest critic before you get to the industry.
I think an important note about Lee, and hopefully I can take this liberty, is that you're not hiring her to have her get you contacts in town.
No.
It's the last thing, technically, that you would do.
Yeah, it's literally the last. It's a bad investment. If that's what you're looking for, bad investment.
You're hiring her to make you do more work.
Yeah, to really streamline the work, to do what I know to have worked, which I've seen worked with. I mean, the luxury of my job is I've seen so many writers break in, and that's really, I work with a lot of, you know, I'm lucky enough and I'm very fortunate in that I work with like A-list studio writers and showrunners who came to me as showrunners or as number 2s, and it's a fortunate and privileged position, but my heart is always with the emerging writers. Like watching a writer break in, watching a writer get, you know, one of my writers just got a first meeting with a manager who read his work and responded. Oh my God.
Right.
I am so excited. Yeah. Like, I get it. Significantly less exciting than getting, you know, a writing assignment $250,000 a week. Yeah. I get that.
Right.
I've seen that happen too.
Yeah.
But ultimately, like, that to me, kind of going from one place to another, getting the first rep, going out to meetings for the first time, you know, winning a contest and then capitalizing that, using that to open doors, getting into a program, staffing for the first time, however it happens.
It's exciting.
It's so exciting. It's the best part of the job.
Because technically it's boring when the successful people continue to find more success.
Yeah, I mean, like...
Depending on the type of success, but you know.
It's great, and again, like, could not be happier for them. One of my writer-directors, we just sat down and talked about, he has 2 movies or 2 screenplays that are out there, and there's some really amazing cast attachments that are coming on right now. Fabulous.
Right.
And we're talking about managing that and the workload and representation, and I could not root for him more. Like, I like the guy genuinely. I love his work. I read a lot of his stuff. I'm really rooting for him all day long. But like, the thing that gives me that kick is watching, you know, a writer who moved to LA with nothing 2 years ago get into a writing program.
Yeah.
Like, that just makes my day.
Yeah. Is there a way to find out what a manager's list is? I see, what their client list is. IMDb Pro, you should be paying $20 a month for it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I use Studio System. So my clients once in a while will say, like, hey, do you know who, you know, Jared Murray is repping right now? And we'll screen grab it and do what we got to do. Studio System, which is an industry database. It's
quite a bit more expensive than IMDb.
A lot more, but they tend to be generous with guest passwords.
Yeah.
So
I used to have one way back when, but yeah.
You know, if you want to be crafty and make some phone calls, but there are ways to do it. If you want to say, like, I'm going to take a week to research stuff and I'm going to do what I can. You know, it's kind of looking at, if you're a TV writer, the shows that you like, the writers that you like, starting to do research on them. Where is their representation?
Yeah.
If you want to find it, the information is there.
You know, it takes a lot more work, but when you're reading Deadline or How the Reporter, these at the bottom of just about every single article or announcement that says this writer's rep by this person, it's in this team, etc.
Yeah.
You can take a running list there. Studio System's probably more up to date than IMDb Pro, I would assume. I would hope for what they're charging. But IMDb Pro is usually pretty up to date. Sometimes
it's enough to kind of start figuring things out.
Yeah, $20 a month. That's at least the easy.
And the thing is, if you're a huge fan of a particular writer, and IMDb Pro shows you that writer is with a particular manager, you can then Google their name and Deadline.com and see what is the most recent article on them, and are they still that? Is there a manager listed?
Right. Yeah. Again, EJ saying, do career coaching. Basically, do you coach on only the pilot, or do you help with the Bible?
Everything.
Yeah,
everything.
Yeah.
Bible pitch, lookbooks for my writer directors.
Most consultants are going to help you develop
pitch decks. Every piece of presentation material.
Yeah.
Including the verbal pitch.
Yeah.
So I have a writer that's going up to studios to pitch a big show right now. So my weekend, it's going to be some wine and pitching.
Right.
Because we have to practice the 45-minute pitch, right?
Yeah.
We have to practice the big vision for the whole show.
Yeah. Does he or she go to your place to do that practice of the pitch?
That will probably do at my house, and with my showrunners and with my writers who are going up, some of them will be on Skype, some of them will be in my house, some of them will be at the coffee shop, because a lot of them are like, I don't care.
Yeah, right.
I will do the dog and pony show anywhere, which is kind of a sign of an industry writer.
Yeah, right.
Like, tell me where to dance, and I will dance.
All right, well let's go another 10 minutes, maybe a little less.
All right.
And if everybody has any questions, Courtney will keep texting them over. Thank you, Courtney, for doing that. I know it's a lot to manage.
I love the questions, so thank you for doing that.
So before you get repped,
yes,
just go through me some examples from in your blog. You mentioned from your industry friends in terms of what working writers think unrepresented writers should be before they do become repped. What are the things you need to be doing before you find a manager?
So the obvious one is work on your craft, right? But work on your craft in such a way that you are really seasoned, because you know your process. Knowing your process is so incredibly important, because once you are repped, that's really where the hard work begins, right? Where you want to produce faster. You want to, kind of show the rep that you're working hard, that here's the new work, and you can keep them excited. So you want to work on your craft. You want to have your readership in place. Who are you getting notes from? Who are you getting really good notes from?
Yeah.
How quickly do you get them? What is your process when you break a new show? If you've only done it once, you probably don't know the process. If you've only written one feature, you're still feeling your work in the dark. So you really want to understand your process. You want to have written a lot, having tried your hand in a lot of things. You want to know your voice.
Do you think there's a minimum number of scripts a writer should have? I hate giving out those numbers because it's too formulaic, but
Listen, I can tell you that I work along with the ISA competitions. I also work with Final Draft competition. Last year, one of our winners...
Oh, you always do the big break, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So one of our category winners wrote a great script by all accounts and was contacted by a big manager. And the manager on the phone said to him, so how many scripts have you written? And the writer said, this is my first one. And the manager literally said, okay, great, call me after your third or your fourth.
Right.
Click.
Yeah.
Because managers want to know that you can repeat the effort, that you didn't get lucky once, that you can replicate what you did, not in terms of content, but in terms of coming back to the same quality of work.
Yeah.
And you need to be able, you can talk about it all day long, but it doesn't matter. You have to be able to show it on the page.
Yeah.
So I prefer to have at least a couple of scripts that are in showable shape, but I usually tend to believe that the deeper the writer is into the craft, the better the writing's going to be. There's a reason why representation, somebody reads your work and likes it but doesn't love it enough to get involved, but think there's something there. They're not going to say, oh, what else have you written? Can you send me the old stuff? Yeah. They're going to say, send me your next script.
Yeah, the next one.
Yeah, you're going to get better by the next script. So send me the next one.
Yeah.
Forget about these other ones.
I heard a producer I don't know, this like 10 years ago. I overheard him talking to a person in the restaurant. This is one part where I was eavesdropping. But it was because I knew the producer, and I was really interested in the conversation because the person he was talking to was a brand new, like literally just moved into town a week ago kind of writer. And he was way too, he was harsh in the right level of energy he was giving, but some of the stuff he was saying, I'm like, geez, man, I mean, this is, he said you're not a screenwriter until you've written 10 screenplays.
Whoa.
And I'm like, man, that is the last, I get what you're trying to do, but you can be a lot more supportive than that.
I definitely would not go there.
Yeah.
I think that you have, there's an element of discovery, right, that every writer needs to go through. There's the writer that you think you are, and then there's the writer that shows up on the page.
Right.
And you have to find
eventually
out.
also.
Yeah. And oftentimes it'll happen through multiple scripts and ideas. I mean, I worked with one writer who came to me swearing that she was a sci-fi writer. This is what she does. This is who she is. She wrote terrible sci-fi. Like, really bad, convoluted, like...
Oh, no.
What just happened? How many worlds are there? What?
Right.
But then we started looking for more ideas, and her psych thrillers were out of this world.
Yeah.
But it took 3 or 4 scripts to get there, and I think that's okay. And I think that's where writers can write across genre if they're trying to discover what their innate voice is appropriate for, but all of that should be done before you get to representation, right? Yeah. You should build your community. You should put your script in contests and see if it rises to the top. Don't put it in one. Like, for me, it's a pet peeve when somebody's like, I entered the ISA contest and I didn't surface anywhere, and therefore I'm a bad writer. Yeah. Enter it into 5. Yeah. Get a market sample. Like, see if the work is starting to rise. Get notes. Get notes from people who are ahead of you. See if they're getting excited about the work. Mm-hmm. See if they're starting to say, oh, I love this when it's ready. Like, let me hand it over to somebody. Yeah. Really study the industry. There's no way to get a crash course in this industry. So that's why reading industry news is really important, because right now if you do a search, finding out about the Sony hack, it's not going to be readily available, but we all know about it. Right. If you're a TV writer, you need to know who John Landgraf is and why, where the data is.
The names. I need to be better at that too. You have just a steel trap of a memory when it comes to these names, and
I try, or at least I pretend well.
But man, there's so many names, especially now in TV, where it's like, who is that person? Then you look them up, you're like, oh my God, he or she. They've done so many things, and I don't even know that person's name. I think that's very important, because you could be blindsided in the meeting when you're talking to a manager and the manager mentions a project or a person, and you're like just
who's in your
head.
Space that you should know. Yeah. The greatest thing the thing to remember is that when representation meets with new writers, nobody wants to be an educator, right? Right. There has to be some sort of a meeting of the minds. And the challenge that writers have, most writers have a full-time job or a part-time job. Many writers have a family. So they're not engaging with the industry and the content that it creates 24/7. Yeah. But managers and agents do.
Totally do.
So it's really important that you watch everything in your space, that you read everything in your space. If you can't watch all of it, get the Cliffs Notes. Like,
the manager and agent will probably think they're smarter than you, at least in terms of the industry and what's going on. But if you can impress them with the amount of things that you know about what's going on, they're going to be like, okay, well, I have more than just a rookie here.
Yeah, if you want to staff on something like Superstore, right? Yeah. And you can track how the staffy is now a supervising producer and rose through the ranks, and they just brought in an ESC who was on another comedy, and it's working really well for them. That inevitably impresses because it shows that you're doing the work. You've learned the industry, you're watching, you're learning. I mean, there's nothing greater than sitting with a manager who's saying, I love your voice, I love the space that you're writing in, and start going back and forth on movies that you both like, and suddenly mentioning like a little obscure movie from 3 years ago that the manager hasn't seen. Right. Like, you will have them like nobody's business. Yeah, right. And today it can be a podcast, it can be a blog, it can be any number of things, and it doesn't mean like develop ADD and do nothing but study, but there has to be some manner of studying the industry so that when you show up for those opportunities, you're ready. Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think... like you said, hire somebody like me or Lee or anybody else. It doesn't really, honestly, doesn't matter. Just practice your craft and get better at it. Somebody that you trust, even if it's just a writer's group. If you can't afford a coach, you have to be making sure that you're improving. It's like that Michael Jordan quote where you could shoot a free throw the wrong way for 10,000 hours, and all you did was learn how to do it the wrong way. And obviously, if you're making the basket, then you could argue whatever. But nonetheless, you have to be improving as opposed to just staying stagnant. And you have to treat this like school. Yeah, you have to find people who challenge you. They can be paid, they can be not paid, it can be any number of things. My thing is, Doesn't matter how you get there. Really identify your writer's diet, right? What are you taking in on a regular basis? What is your output? And challenge yourself to do it systematically and methodically. Step out of your comfort zone.
Right.
Work with people who challenge you, whether they're in online writers groups that you pay nothing for other than your cell phone fee or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But really find people who challenge you.
Yeah. Because that forces you to not be allowed or able to rely on your innate ability. I think every writer has some form of an innate quality and ability, but you can't rely on that. Like every professional athlete, everyone who's rise to the top of any game or industry didn't just find their way there because they're a genius.
No, listen, nobody's career ever that I know in recent years has just happened because
they happen to be...
They were right there.
Yeah.
I mean, never settle for good enough. Always strive for great. I mean, I go back to Lloyd Dobler, so looking for a dare to be great situation.
Right.
This is a dare to be great situation. If you listen to the complaints that the industry has right now, is there's a lot of good and not enough great.
Yeah.
So push yourself and find people who will push you along, and find people who will make you better. It's in my writers take classes, I always tell them I want you to be the dumbest kid in the class, because then you can learn the most.
Yeah,
if you're the smartest kid in the class, we got problems, and we got to move you out of the class.
Yeah. Or you think you are, and then you're not going to listen, and that's a whole
yeah. But no, it's and trust me, I have working writers who are constantly, if they're on hiatus or between projects, they're going to go to a class for the deadline, for the structure, for just to get out of the house.
Right. And
in those scenarios, that's a different thing. But as you are working your way up, you want to be challenged, but by people that you respect, by people whose sensibilities you agree with.
Right.
But you want it's a growing type thing that you're looking for here.
It's all about growth.
Yep.
And it's also a matter of me trying to make sure that Lloyd Dobler was say anything. Or was it better up dead? Was what Lloyd Dobler was saying anything?
Yeah, that was say anything.
Yeah, okay.
That was...
My brain, as you were talking, I was like 50-50 between what you were saying.
No, say anything.
It is say anything, right?
So, what are you looking for, Lloyd?
Yeah.
I don't know, sir.
Dare to be great situation. That's right. Yeah, I don't know, sir. Oh, he said that's a job.
I'm not looking to sell anything or buy anything. I'm not looking to buy anything sold bought. I'm not looking to...
Nice.
You know the drill.
All right, everybody. Well, that is our broadcast. You can go to leejessup.com and find out everything about what's going on with her. You can read all of her blog posts for free. Sign up for the newsletter.
All that good stuff.
You're going to be at a whole bunch of events this year, I'm sure, so you can stay. I don't know. I could list everything. And, of course, thank you to Steel Wine, as always.